They spent 6 years telling me I did not belong at their table. So I left.
She thought she was marrying into a family. But from the very first bite of their celebratory dinner, Linda knew she was marrying into a contract. Carol, her fiancé's mother, set her wine glass down with a soft clink and slid a manila folder across the polished oak table. Carol did not even look at her son, Mark. Her eyes were fixed on Linda with a smile that was all teeth. "Before we move forward," Carol said, her voice dripping with condescension, "we need to discuss something important. It is just a formality to protect Mark's assets." Linda should have walked out right then. She should have grabbed her purse, thanked them for the meal, and never looked back. But she was in love. Or at least, she was in love with the man Mark pretended to be when his parents were not around. So she looked at Mark, waiting for him to say something, to defend her honor, to tell his parents she was not some gold digger. But he just sat there, pushing a green bean around his plate, his jaw tight. He would not meet her eyes. At the time, Linda was doing more than fine on her own. She was a senior software engineer in San Diego, pulling in a great salary, living in her own modern apartment in La Jolla, with a retirement account she had built from the ground up. She was not a millionaire, but she was independent, secure, and proud of it. Mark, on the other hand, had never known a day of financial worry in his life. His parents, Carol and Robert, owned one of the most successful commercial real estate firms in Southern California. They had bought him a house in Del Mar, paid for his college, his grad school, and handed him a corner office in their company. He had a cushy title and a salary that was more of an allowance. From their first date, Linda could feel the disapproval radiating from his parents. Carol would ask pointed questions about her family, her background, her goals. Robert, a man of few words, would simply stare at her as if she were a piece of furniture that did not quite match the room. They were never outright rude, but they made it painfully clear that a self-made woman was not what they had in mind for their only son. But Mark was different with her. He would tell her he did not care what they thought. He loved her. He saw her. And like a fool, she believed him. So when the prenup was slid across the table, she signed it. Her hand did not even tremble. She looked Carol dead in the eye and signed on the dotted line. "I understand," she said quietly. She thought, "I do not want their money. This piece of paper will never matter." And the look of smug satisfaction on Carol's face, as she tucked the folder into her designer handbag, was a look Linda promised herself she would never forget. The first year of marriage was good. The second year was okay. By the third year, Linda started to see the cracks in the foundation. Mark got comfortable. The man who used to bring her coffee in bed started coming home late without an explanation. The man who told her she was brilliant started rolling his eyes when she spoke about her work. And then he started sounding exactly like his mother. Little digs disguised as jokes. "Are you sure you want to wear that? Maybe you should talk to my mom's dermatologist. You are so lucky I take care of everything." Never mind that Linda was working a demanding full-time job. Never mind that she was contributing to the bills, even though they lived in the Del Mar house his parents had given him. In his mind, it was always his house, his money, his life. She was just a guest who was lucky to be there. Carol and Robert, of course, encouraged this. They had keys to the house and used them. They would walk in unannounced, criticizing the way Linda decorated, complaining if she moved a single piece of furniture. It was clear they still saw it as their house, and Linda as a temporary inconvenience. "You are so fortunate that Mark takes care of you," Carol would say with a knowing smirk. Linda was done. She was done arguing for respect in a home where she would never be seen as an equal. She was just tired. Then, out of nowhere, everything shifted. Her great-uncle, a man she barely knew, passed away. He was an eccentric, a recluse who had made a fortune in early biotech and had no children and few living relatives. Linda did not think much of the call from the lawyer, assuming it was about some small keepsake. When she got the news, she was standing in the kitchen of the Del Mar house. The lawyer's words were clinical. "Your uncle, he left everything to you. The estate, after taxes, comes to approximately $22 million. Linda nearly dropped the phone. When Mark got home that night, she told him. She expected shock. She expected him to sit with her in the surreal weight of it. Instead, he froze, his eyes widening. "Wait, how much?" he whispered, and just like that, she saw his true face. It was not shock. It was hunger. Have you ever had a moment where someone you trusted showed you exactly who they really were? That moment when the mask slips and you realize everything you believed was built on a lie? If you have ever felt that gut punch of betrayal, you are not alone. And if you love stories where the underestimated woman rises up and takes back her power, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Fireside Tales, where we bring you stories of justice, resilience, and the quiet fury of walking away. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and join our community. You will not want to miss what comes next in this story. Within a week, Linda was suddenly worthy. Carol, who had spent 6 years treating her like an intruder, called her for a private lunch at a seaside restaurant in La Jolla. She smiled across the table, a genuine warm smile Linda had never seen before. "I always knew you were special," Carol said, reaching across to pat her hand. "You were the one for Mark. I could always tell." Robert, who had barely uttered 2 words to her in half a decade, suddenly wanted to take her out for coffee to discuss business strategies. He had ideas for how to invest her money. He wanted to introduce her to his financial advisor. Mark became a different person. He was attentive, sweet, and full of grand plans. He talked about buying a vacation home in Cabo. He talked about remodeling the Del Mar house. He started dropping hints about investing in his father's company, using the exact phrase Carol had used at lunch. "It just makes sense to keep the wealth in the family." He never once asked her what she wanted to do with the money. He just assumed it was his. And that is when Linda knew. He had never loved her. Not really. She had been a placeholder, a convenient wife to complete the picture for his parents. And now that she had something they wanted, they were all pretending she was finally worthy of their time. So she smiled. She smiled through their fake compliments. She let Carol link arms with her at brunch. She let Robert draw up his little investment plans. She let Mark talk about their future. She played the role of the grateful, happy wife. But in the shadows, she was working. First, she opened a separate bank account at a credit union Mark had no connection to. She moved her entire inheritance there, a transaction she did herself during her lunch break. Then, she hired a top-tier divorce attorney, a fierce woman known for handling high-net-worth cases in San Diego. When they went over the prenup line by line, her lawyer let out a low whistle. It turned out that Carol and Robert, in their arrogance, had been so focused on protecting their own dynasty, on making sure Linda could not touch a dime of Mark's house or his future inheritance, that they had crafted the most one-sided document imaginable. There was no clause protecting Mark from her. There was no reciprocity. If they divorced, Mark had no legal claim to any money or assets she obtained during the marriage. Not a single cent. Linda nearly laughed out loud in her lawyer's office. The very document they had used to humiliate her, to brand her as a gold digger, was now the shield that would protect her entire fortune. But she was not done. She started quietly looking for her own house. A beachfront property in La Jolla, just a few miles from the Del Mar house, that she paid for in cash. It was hers outright, with Mark's name nowhere on the deed. For weeks, she laid the groundwork, untangling her life from his. And then, Mark gave her the final push she needed. He started coming home later and later. He was always on his phone, a new nervous energy about him. Then one night, his phone buzzed on the bathroom counter while he was in the shower. A message lit up the screen from a contact named Brittany. It read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Last time was incredible." Linda felt nothing. No pain, no anger. Just a cold, clear sense of finality. She scrolled through the messages. Months of texts, photos, hotel reservations. It had been going on for a long time, probably before she inherited the money. And that is when she realized the truth. Mark was not just after her money. He was trying to secure his future, to extract as much as he could from her, before he left her for Brittany. He thought he was playing her. He had no idea what was coming. She did not confront him. Instead, she called a private investigator, the same one her lawyer recommended. If Mark wanted to play dirty, she would play smarter. Within a week, she had everything. Photos of Mark and Brittany at a hotel in downtown San Diego, videos of them kissing at a bar in Del Mar, receipts for expensive dinners and jewelry. She took the evidence straight to her lawyer. One evening, a few weeks later, Mark came home in a buoyant mood. He poured himself a scotch and started rambling about a new business venture Robert had cooked up, one he was sure would double their money. As he talked, Linda calmly slid a large, white envelope across the kitchen island. He frowned, setting his glass down. "What is this?" "Open it," she said. He pulled out the divorce papers. His expression shifted from confusion to a disbelieving laugh. "You are kidding, right?" He flipped through the pages, and the laugh died in his throat. His face went pale. "You do realize you get nothing, right?" He scoffed, shaking his head, his voice rising. "The prenup. You signed it. You get nothing from me." Linda reached into her bag and pulled out her copy of the prenup, the same one Carol had slid across the table years ago. She flipped it open to the page her lawyer had highlighted. She turned it so he could see. The clause that stated, in clear, unmistakable legal language, that Mark had no claim to any money or assets she obtained during the marriage. His face drained of color. He snatched the document from her, reading it, flipping back and forth, searching for a loophole that was not there. "This is not," he stammered. "You and your parents made sure I would leave with nothing of yours," Linda said, her voice calm. "You just forgot to make sure you would get anything of mine." The silence in the kitchen was heavy. She pulled out a second envelope, the one from the private investigator, and slid it across the island. "By the way," she said, her voice light, casual, "you might want to look at these." He opened it. The photos of him and Brittany spilled out. His affair, in high-definition color, spread across the marble counter. He went completely still, his face a mask of horror. She smiled, a small, quiet smile. "I will let my lawyer know you have seen everything. We will be in touch." Then she grabbed her bag, her keys, and walked out the front door, leaving him alone in the house she had never truly called home. She did not hear from Mark that night. The next morning, her phone rang. It was not Mark. It was not Robert. It was Carol. Linda watched the name flash on the screen and let it ring. It rang again, and again. On the third call, she picked up. "How could you do this to him?" Carol's voice was a sharp, cold hiss. "Do what?" Linda asked, genuinely curious. "Leave him? Expose him? You are ruining his life," Carol snapped. "And for what? Some petty revenge?" Linda laughed. It was a short, humorless sound. "You forced me to sign a prenup. You made it clear I was nothing in your family. And now you are mad because I am leaving. You are destroying him," Carol repeated. "No," Linda said, her voice hardening. "I am just letting him face the consequences of his own actions." There was a beat of silence on the line. Then Carol's voice dropped to a low, venomous whisper. "You will regret this." The line went dead. Linda leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. "So that is how they want to play it. Fine." The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Then her lawyer called. "They are contesting the prenup," she said. "They are trying to claim it should be nullified on the basis of unfair circumstances." Linda burst out laughing. "Unfair? They wrote the damn thing." But Carol and Robert were not stupid. They were powerful. They had connections, high-priced lawyers, and they were now scrambling to stop their son from losing everything. They were willing to spend whatever it took to get their hands on her money. But Linda had expected this. She had prepared for this. And she had one more card left to play. The day of the court hearing, Mark, Carol, and Robert arrived with a team of 3 expensive attorneys. Linda arrived with her lawyer and a forensic accountant. While they were busy trying to find a way to take her money, Linda had been digging into theirs. What her forensic accountant found was a gold mine. Shady business deals, tax fraud, hidden offshore accounts. Carol and Robert had been cooking their company's books for over a decade. So when their lawyer smugly stood up to argue that the prenup was unconscionable, Linda's lawyer calmly rose, placed a thick stack of papers on the judge's bench, and said, "Before we get into that, Your Honor, we have something to present." Linda watched as Carol's face went pale, the color draining so fast it was as if someone had pulled a plug. Robert stiffened in his seat, his jaw clenching so hard she could see the muscle twitch. Mark just looked confused, glancing between his parents and the judge. The judge flipped through the documents. He read for a long moment, the silence in the courtroom absolute. Then he looked up, his eyes cold. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson," he said, his voice low and grave. "Do you understand the gravity of what I am looking at?" Carol physically swayed in her chair, her hand gripping Robert's arm. "Your company has been engaging in extensive financial misconduct," Linda's lawyer continued. "And given that Mark is listed as a corporate executive, he may be implicated as well." That is when Mark finally spoke. "What?" His voice was a high-pitched squeak. "No, I do not handle finances. I do not." He turned to his parents, his eyes wide with terror. "Mom? Dad?" But they were not looking at him. They were looking at Linda. And in that moment they finally understood. She was not just leaving. She was not just taking her money and walking away. She was taking them down with her. The judge refused to throw out the prenup. Linda's $22 million remained hers, untouched and untouchable. But Carol and Robert were facing a full-scale federal investigation. The IRS seized their records. Their company accounts were frozen. And Mark, whether he knew it or not, was implicated in the fraud. His name was on the documents. The Del Mar house, the one they swore she would never have a claim to, was seized by the bank. The business that had been their identity for 40 years was shuttered. Their reputation, the only currency they truly valued, was destroyed overnight. Linda walked out of the courthouse a free woman. Wealthy, untouchable, and completely free. Mark tried calling her over and over. First, he was furious. "You set me up," he screamed into her voicemail. "You ruined my life." Then he was desperate. "We can fix this, Linda. Just talk to me." Then finally he cried. She ignored every single call. She heard through a mutual friend that Carol and Robert were forced to sell their sprawling Rancho Santa Fe estate just to pay their mounting legal fees. They ended up in a rented condo in a nondescript part of town. Mark, with no job, no money, and no prospects, moved in with them. Months later, Linda was sitting on the deck of her new beachfront house in La Jolla, a glass of wine in her hand, watching the sun set over the Pacific. Her phone buzzed. It was a number she did not recognize, but the area code was local. She answered out of curiosity. "Is this Linda?" A woman's voice asked, sharp and brittle. It was Brittany, Mark's mistress. "This is your fault," Brittany snapped. Linda leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. "I assume Mark did not tell you everything." There was a bitter laugh on the other end. "He is broke. He told me we would start a new life. He promised me everything. And now he is living in his parents' rental condo with nothing." Linda said nothing, letting the silence speak for her. "So what do you want me to do about it?" she finally asked, her voice soft. Brittany's voice turned to a sharp whisper. "He is your husband." Linda laughed, a genuine, full laugh. "Not anymore." She hung up. She did not think about Mark much after that. But she heard through the grapevine that after everything collapsed, Brittany disappeared, of course. Mark was left with nothing but his parents' bitterness and a mountain of legal debt. The house she once lived in, the one they had lorded over her, was gone. The money they thought would always protect them was gone. The reputation they valued more than anything was destroyed. And Linda, she was finally, completely, gloriously free. If the story reminded you that the very thing meant to trap you can sometimes become your greatest escape, then you belong with us here at Fireside Tales. We bring you stories of resilience, revenge, and the quiet power of knowing when to walk away. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. And before you go, tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what you would have done in Linda's shoes. We read every single comment and we would love to hear from you.